Today we're going to talk about how I came up with a plan to make it through prison. If you're facing a challenge with the criminal justice system, you really want to be thinking about how you want to emerge. And if you like those kinds of videos, you would really encourage you to subscribe to the Prison Professor's YouTube channel, because we're producing content just about every single day that will be a little bit different from what you see on other YouTube channels that profile the prison experience. There are a lot of programs out here that will talk about the traditional adjustment in prison, which really gets the traditional result, which is very high recidivism rates and continuing problems with the law. But if you want to come out of prison successfully, this is the channel for you to subscribe to. And again, we're producing content every single day. My name is Michael Santos. I was in prison from 1987 until 2013. But what really made the difference in me being able to come home successfully was setting a plan at the very earliest stage in the journey. And in the previous video where I spoke about what it was like to go through 45 years in prison, or why I received a 45-year prison sentence, I spoke a little bit about philosophy. Now, at the earliest stages in my journey, I didn't have any idea what philosophy was. All I knew was that I hated being in prison. And because I hated being in prison, I had to start projecting into how I would want to emerge differently. And if you're going into the system, that's something that you're going to want to be thinking about. You're going to be looking for role models or people that can inspire you to get an outcome that is fundamentally different from what anybody else expects to come out of the prison system. I mean, if you think about what is going to be the outcome for somebody that's going into the system with a 45-year sentence, you got to kind of project and say, well, what does that look like? Like, think about it today. I'm filming this video in June of 2020. I served 26 years. So if somebody was going to get out in 26 years, they wouldn't be coming back to society until 2046. The challenge is, how does somebody maintain a strong mindset and focus on success while traversing through 9,500 days in prison? That begins by having a plan. And the plan for me, I will say, really began when I read this story about Socrates, as I mentioned in the previous video. The reason I could identify with Socrates was because he was in prison waiting for a death sentence to be carried out. He'd already been sentenced to death, and he's sitting in jail. And when he's sitting in jail, and I read this story about him, it's what really got me thinking, because I was facing life without the possibility of parole. And if I was thinking about life without the possibility of parole, it was effectively the same thing to me as a death sentence, because I would have been to die. I was ready to die in prison. But I didn't want that. So I had to start thinking about, well, if I don't want that outcome, what is it that I want? And I had to recognize that what I really wanted was to just be a normal American citizen again. I hated jail and I hated prison so much that I started thinking about, well, what's the best possible outcome for me? And that's something that you can be thinking about. What's the best possible outcome for you? Because to the extent that you start thinking about that, you will come up with a different framework, a different mindset, hopefully a plan that will carry you through. And that's what this is all about. How do you create a plan that will carry you through? Well, the first step in creating a plan is really defining success. But that success can be defined differently depending upon who you want to be in your circle. Who are the stakeholders that are going to be thinking about you? Is it going to be the people that will give you a job? Is it going to be the people that will open business opportunities for you? Is it going to be the parole board that may let you out? Is it going to be other prisoners? Because other prisoners have a specific philosophy on how to serve time in prison. And the message that I always heard is the best way to serve time is to forget about the world outside and to focus exclusively on what your reputation is like while you're in prison. And if you search YouTube on how to serve time in prison, you're going to find a lot of that messaging. You're going to find a lot of that messaging that talks about the negative influences of prison and how to adjust with those negative influences in prison. But if you want a different outcome, you've got to create a different kind of a plan. And that plan has to have you thinking about what type of future do you want. You see, when I was starting my journey inside of that prison cell, not knowing whether I was going to get a life sentence or 10 years or 20 years or 30 years, I had no idea. I had to start thinking about the future that I wanted to create. because we create our future. Don't ever look to some other individual to tell you what your future is going to be. Learn how to carve out and create your future like the self-made man. Think of yourself having a chisel and a hammer and your block of stone, and you're going to chip yourself away to become the type of person that you want to become. To the extent you think about that, you're going to start thinking about, well, what kind of people am I going to encounter in the future? And what steps can I take today to influence those people? So think about the staff members that may have some influence on what level of security you go to. Start thinking about a future parole board that may not exist today but may exist in the future. What can you be doing today to influence the possibility of getting a favorable outcome from those people that will assess you? Think about a future probation officer that may have some influence on the level of liberty that you will have in your future. Think about the employers that you are going to encounter and how you are going to respond to them about why you have a gap in your resume, where you've been for the last year, 5 years, 10 years. How are you going to respond to that? To the extent you think about that, you are going to be able to, begin crafting the plan that will work for you. And the plan that worked for me may not be the same plan that works for somebody else. But I knew that when I was beginning this journey during that awkward phase of the time that a judge sentenced me to 45 years and the time that I got to prison, I had a solid plan, and I was thinking about, I want to come home and I want to be able to put on a suit and tie, go into any room, and nobody will know that I served a day in prison. If that's what you want, then you've got to be creating a plan that will get you there. And I knew I wanted to be involved or I wanted to prepare myself in ways that would allow me to start my own businesses. So I had to create a plan that would help me think like a businessman, focus like a CEO. I needed to be the CEO of my life. Just like I would encourage you, become the CEO of your life. Think about how you are going to be able to get credit in spite of having a felony background. I want you to think about how you are going to be able to reconcile with society so that people don't look at you for the worst decisions that you made that brought you to prison, but rather you are thinking about a reputation where people look at you and say, I really respect this individual for the way that he responded to his situation. If the goal is to be a super convict or a super prisoner, Prison Professors is not the channel for you. But if the goal is to come back strong with your dignity intact, this channel will provide you with that type of information about how do you create a solid plan to restore your reputation, to build hope so that you don't have to be defined by for the rest of your life for what brought you into the jail or prison system in the first place. You've really got to begin by defining success. What is the best possible outcome for you? And you define that. Don't let your environment define that for you. Don't let the prison system define that for you. I can't tell you how many times as I started to advance through my journey, and I had 10 years behind me, 20 years behind me, 25 years behind me, staff members would look at me and say, you didn't look like you served this much time in prison. But the reality is that's because it was a plan. You've got to have a plan that will help you succeed upon your release. And to the extent that you articulate that plan, you are going to be able to influence the people in the future that will have a level of control over your liberty, possibly even whether you can get out of prison early. Now, I served every day of my sentence. I had a 45-year sentence, and despite having a very solid plan, I didn't get out one day earlier. I did 9,500 days in prison, but every one of those days was consistent with the plan that I set, consistent with the strategy that I put in place at the very earliest stage of the journey. And that strategy was documented. I stated that I wanted to come home with my dignity intact. I wanted to be able to put on a suit and tie and do business with anybody, and nobody would hold me back just because I was in prison for longer than a quarter century. But in order to do that, I had to document the strategy, I had to create tools and tactics and resources, and then I had to measure my progress every single day. Now, it doesn't matter how you define success. If you embrace those three principles while you are creating your plan, you're going to put yourself on a pathway to a better outcome. So what's the great takeaway from this? is that you first have to define success of what you want in prison. Do you want the other people in prison to define how you're supposed to live? Do you want staff members to put this mindset on you that tells you, if you can't do the crime, don't do the time? Do you want to listen to other prisoners who say the best way to serve time is to have a ball of hate in your stomach and a knife? Or do you want to say, no, that is not going to be me. I am going to emerge from this system successfully, with my dignity intact, with opportunities to live a life of meaning and relevance and dignity. And if that's what you want, you definitely need to start by creating your plan. That's the takeaway. My plan was that during the first 10 years of my imprisonment, I would earn at least one university degree. I would become a published author, which would be my way of contributing to society in meaningful, measurable ways. And 3, I would have built a very strong success network, a group of mentors that I call them really my board of directors. I had to give them the tools so that they can advocate for me and help things become better. So if you're going into this system and you need to create a plan, start by defining success. Create a documented strategy that you can follow. Create tools, tactics, and resources that will help you execute on your plan, and make sure that you are measuring your progress every single day. Now, if you like this type of information and you're curious about getting more, make sure that you subscribe to the Prison Professors program. Just click the button, and I think there's a bell as well that you can push, that you get notified every time we produce new videos. I produce new videos basically every day with the idea of helping people emerge from this system differently from the messages that we see on so many other prison channels. You may want to, in the banner of the YouTube channel, there is a free guide that I would suggest that you download regardless of what stage in the journey you're in, so that you can learn a little bit more about what you can do to position yourself for success. Not as I define success, but as you define success. You definitely need a plan to put yourself on that pathway. And my hopes are that you'll become a part of the Prison Professors community. If you have a story to share, hit me up, let me know, and I will be very happy to interview you and provide some guidance to the extent that we have the time available. I do encourage you to support our sponsors. We are sponsored by CBDTV.com. They provide us with the resources we need to produce this content every day. We bring it into jails and prisons across America with hopes of really changing the outcome and the mindset of people in prison. Again, Prison Professors, fundamentally different from the negative message. We want to show you best possible outcomes. That is the way that we can be the change that we want to see in the world. And if you'd rather listen to this content, we also have a podcast at Prison Professors that we'd love for you to subscribe to. But visit our website at Prison Professors. We've got books, we've got guides, we've got information to help you if you are going into this system, and we've got information to help your loved ones if they are in this system. If you want a different outcome, just remember that success does not materialize by accident. It requires a deliberate strategy. That's what you will learn at Prison Professors, and we do hope that you will subscribe.